I'm the rabbi here at Kesher, and it's a really special pleasure for us to be hosting this book launch for our good friend Daniel Biro. And you will, some of you know him, some of you may not know him, but you'll all get to know him very soon. So I am just going to welcome everyone and to give Dan an opportunity to talk about himself a little bit. Initially, I may have some questions for him as well. You may have some questions as well. I would like to just begin.
Rabbi, who's manning the camera? Is it already?
It's
manning itself.
That's right. It's artificial intelligence. That's right. I would just like, by way of introduction, to quote a couple of short paragraphs from an essay written, I think anonymously, I guess I'll allow him to remain anonymous, in which he interviewed Daniel 10 years ago for a fundraising event we had celebrating 10 years at Kesher, 10 years of connecting, and actually now it's 20 years of connecting. And I showed it to Daniel himself for a short while ago. I said, is there any truth in this? And I said, I know there's some truth in it, but I said it's mostly true. So let me just read a couple of short paragraphs, and then I'm going to give Daniel a chance to talk on his own. Born in South Africa into a family with Hungarian and Croatian roots, he grew up in France, studied at the Jazz Academy of Monaco, and traveled the world as a professional musician before settling in London. But it wasn't until he was in his 30s that a deathbed testament by a great aunt made him face a different kind of music. She told my cousin that our family was Jewish. My cousin told me, and then my parents confirmed it. The family consensus had been they didn't want to tell the children. Both my parents' families had converted to Christianity, but when the Nazis came, they found themselves put into the same bag as other Jews, to their great shock. But Daniel had a shock of his own with that discovery going back quite a few years now, and in a way that represents the genesis of the gathering here this evening and the book that we're here to learn a lot more about. So after those few words of introduction, Daniel, I'd like to give you a chance to talk about yourself a little bit. If I have any further questions, I'll put them to you.
Thanks, Rabbi. And first of all, it's not a coincidence that I'm here tonight doing this here, because obviously it was through you and Kesher and Ruthie that was my first sort of port of entry into the Jewish world, and it's a bit of a full circle to be here tonight talking about what happened, 20 years ago really, because I was kind of here at the beginning of Kesher, and so it's it feels like the right place to do it and with the right people. And also I wanted to thank Rabbi Tatz, who's not here, but he sends his regards, and saying that because he supported me in this project from the very beginning, and fact-checked the book, and also supported me with the publishing. So it's thanks to him really that this has actually become a reality. The story is long and intricate, so I won't get too much into the details, but yeah, the fact is that I found out when I was 30 years old that the family was Jewish, and this was, until then we had led secular, non-particularly religious lives, but officially Christian. And I know my wife won't like this, but I will say again that I was actually baptized in St. Peter's in Rome, which was because we were living in Rome at the time, and my father was working for KLM Airlines, and they were supplying all the flights for the Vatican. So he was doing business with the Vatican, which is an interesting story in itself. But when I was born, he was offered the great honor to have me baptized in St. Peter's. So the irony is obviously quite significant. But so when I was 30 years old, my great aunt on her deathbed sort of said to my cousin, but by the way, we're all Jewish, and so it was a bit of a shock, and she was a very theatrical person, so she went out with a bang, and she knew how to deliver the punchline.
Left you with the fallout.
That's right. So then I confronted my parents. I asked my parents, and they confirmed that, on both sides, that there were Jewish roots, and that they had already converted to Christianity, one or two, sometimes 2 generations back, and but when the wars broke out and the Nazis came, they were in trouble, and on either side they managed to escape from Hungary and Croatia, and ended up different in France and Italy, but eventually they ended up in South Africa, and that's where they met and married. And my brother was born there, but then they moved back to Europe, to Rome, where I was born. But I was born in South Africa, but they were already living in Rome. We moved around. We went to the UK for 2 years, back to Italy, to Milan for 2 years, and then from the age of 9, I grew up in France, in the south of France, where we became French. So officially, I'm French national, and there I studied music and became basically engrossed with a potential musical career, for which the place to be was London. And so after my music degree in the south of France, I had a band, and we packed up all our gear and got into a van and came to London, hoping for glory and fortune and rock and roll. And of course it didn't work out, but okay, I carried on with my music career here in London, and things were going reasonably okay. So then this kind of bombshell fell out of the sky, and yeah, it was interesting, but I didn't particularly do anything about it initially, and I just sort of started to make some connections with other Jewish artists, musicians, composers, and maybe thinking, well, what's the connection, or is there one, and is there anything that relates to me? And so it wasn't something that triggered initially a huge drive to reclaim my Jewish heritage, but eventually I met a musician who I was working with, and who was actually converting to Judaism. And that intrigued me, because I couldn't understand why somebody would actually want to become Jewish, when my parents and my family had done everything to cover up that we were Jewish. So it intrigued me, and that person started lending me tapes of shiurim, of the classes, mainly Noah Weinberg's Aish classes, and he's a good way to start, because it's all very, very friendly and very and it all started to, all these things started to sort of fall into my lap, and I kind of I couldn't argue with any of them. I couldn't say, yeah, well, this is just another, because obviously I had dealt with Christianity, as a concept, and decided that it wasn't really anything I wanted to pursue, and other, spiritual paths, more or less legitimate ones, from a bit of Buddhism, a bit of Tibetan astral body travel, and going into Scientology and things that, so I explored a range of things, and none of them really stuck, because you could always sort of find the flaw that sort of said, well, why is that there? But with these tapes, and I was listening to, and books I was starting to read, there was no way really I could argue with them, or it all made sense. And obviously the conclusion of all these things making sense was, well, what am I supposed to do about it? And So it took a long time, and it took a while, but slowly things started to sort of fall into place a bit more. And obviously one of the main books I was reading were the books of Rabbi Tatz, and he that just blew me away, and that was just a whole different level of let's say, perceiving the world in a way that is not only makes sense, but just goes beyond anything that I could have even imagined in terms of what the setup was of a spiritual reality, a spiritual world. So, and then I found out he was actually in London, because I was living in Islington at the time, but he was actually in London and giving classes in London. So I started to attend his classes, and and every time it was like another sort of bomb of information and something that took me somewhere even deeper and further. And but the downside of it was that I would have to actually do something about it at some point.
That's the catch, huh?
The catch, yeah. And so yeah, that was a slower process rather than the intellectual process was all going well, but the observance process was taking its time, and obviously reluctantly, because I wasn't necessarily unhappy where I was. I wasn't desperately looking for a spiritual life or a spiritual world or a religion. I had my music. I was enjoying being a musician, and that was in a way my religion and my outlet for any spiritual sort of like, as David probably understands well. And so I wasn't unhappy, and I wasn't desperate to change my lifestyle, but it obviously needed to happen, and it had to sort of start putting my putting things into action, into practice. So then I contacted the London-based Inn, and the first person to come on the phone was Rabbi Simon, and it was a long conversation, I remember, and it was a very pleasant one and a very caring one, and it was obviously an experience in these matters, but it sort of gave me confidence to kind of get into the process of actually seeing what I need to do to reestablish my Jewish credentials. And that took some time too, and there was paperwork and blah, blah, blah. I had to find marriage certificates or death certificates of my grandparents. And so eventually though, I got there, and then I was officially recognized as Jewish, and so it wasn't an actual conversion, but it was a sort of reaffirmation of Jewish identity, and yeah, that was interesting. And then I, obviously living in Islington was not the best thing, because I had a choice of either moving to Stamford Hill or moving to Golders Green, so I choose the lesser of two evils and came to Golders Green, where because also the Rabbi Tatz was here in the classes, and I was going to the JLE, and I was also then starting to come to Kesher and follow Rabbi Simon's guidance and Ruthie's help. So that's really the kind of journey that brought me. Then things went. Obviously, I got married. I have 3 beautiful children, and it's an ongoing process still. And I would say that it's you never feel totally there, in the sense that I think people like me and my wife, we always feel a bit like fish out of water, even though we are in the water, because we come from a different place, and our cultural references especially are different, and our knowledge of the outside world is different, and I think one of the advantages or actual characteristics of what we go through is that we appreciate also the non-Jewish world more, and we know what there is that is to be appreciated of the non-Jewish world. So it's in a way it's trying to juggle different cultures together, and okay, it's an ongoing process, and I think we will always be a transitional kind of generation, but our children, born here and have all their friends and school, and so they are actually very well rooted in the Jewish community. But for us, it's different. We have roots in different places, but we have chosen a lifestyle that is diametrically opposed to the one we came from, and that it's hard work, and you try and keep the richness of that sort of dual identity going, because I don't think it's necessary to give up the world as a whole in order to lead a Jewish life, an orthodox Jewish life. So that's in a way the challenge is to retain the good and move forward with the observance and with trying to fit into the community, and that's in a way where the book idea sort of came from.
I wanted to ask you actually, Daniel, if you could tell us a little bit about your thinking in writing the book and what motivated you to write it. We'll talk inevitably about the benefit of it and the kind of person who would benefit from it. But first, tell us about how you decided there's a value or something you wanted to give expression to put it in writing.
It was a fairly simple idea, but it was already at least 15 years ago that I wanted to do it, and the idea was just to help other people who might go through the same process that I went through, to avoid basic pitfalls, basically. So it's just about practicalities, and so I try to remember, or try to sort of start jotting down all the embarrassing moments and all the awkward moments and all the things that I thought, well, if only I'd known this before, and because nobody tells you these things, nobody tells you these things, and the rabbis have their problems or their things to deal with. They're not going to start sort of telling you, by the way, when you are invited for Shabbos the first time, make sure you don't do this and this and so those kind of really practical, down to earth things, and I wanted to structure the book in the order in which things might happen when you start interacting with the Orthodox community. So the first thing is obviously you get invited for a Shabbos meal to somebody, and so what happens and what to do and what not to do. Then you might have to therefore go to a synagogue, to a shul for the first time, and so what do you do then? So it's a kind of pilgrim's progress in practical terms, and how it's a very practical, and I didn't obviously want to go too much in depth in anything in particular, because it's not the role of such a sort of guidebook. So that was the sort of the initial idea. It was just like, well, what would have needed at the time to just make it a little bit easier to navigate through the initial stages.
Can you tell us about any surprises that you encountered in writing the book, by which I mean challenges in expressing something or addressing something, or possibly even, I'm not saying the book has any of this, but you know, where you need to be a bit apologetic to your reader vis-a-vis the encounter that he or she may make within the Orthodox Jewish world.
I think you know, everything. It's hard to. It's a very complicated thing, and I think the first impression one gets is that it's a completely alien lifestyle to, you know, how you lived before, and also almost sort of compulsive, obsessive kind of, you know, attention to details, which you think, well, what does that matter? You know, you know, who cares, you know, about this or that, and you know, and that's the whole point, is that you start learning that everything matters and everything counts and every little detail is important, and that can be very, you know, a big shock initially, because you just think, well, you know, how am I ever going to learn all these things, or okay, I mean, there are very good rabbis and books already out there who sort of guide you through these early stages, saying, well, you don't have to do everything, but you start with this and start with that. But still, it's not always clear, you know, what, you know, how do you actually do it, you know. So I think it's just kind of the book is trying to tell people, you know, don't worry too much about it. It looks like it's a huge amount of things to you know, and it is, but you know, just there are ways of just choosing the most important things to do first, and what those important things are, and that's the real aim of the book, is to say, well, you know, somebody comes to a service, a shul, what does he do, you know, or she? I mean, what do they have a book? What do they, you know, what do they start with, and what are the main prayers, and there are, you know, a lot of books about these things, but they're all in a way separate tomes about praying, you know, and then there's about Shabbos, and then there's, so I just wanted to put everything together quickly, you know, simply in a small little volume.
To me, the feature that is so compelling is the practicality of it. That whereas those other books that you just alluded to are more conceptual and explaining, often in very, you know, lucid and compelling and intellectually satisfying language, but explaining ideas and you know, halachic principles. Whereas your book actually is a handbook, is a guidebook for someone practically. What do you say? How do you avoid the most egregious? Someone has to say egregious. I think Americans say egregious, but I may be wrong. Faux pas, you know, how do you limit yourself to one or two per evening rather than a dozen, you know, consecutive? And those kinds of practical guidance, I think, is very, very worthwhile. And I would venture to say it's the first book of its kind, really. And although Daniel has presented his background, you know, very well, but I just want to make the obvious connection. Daniel has a credibility and an expertise in this particular subject, which I'm not saying is unique in the world, but there are not too many other people who came to Judaism, albeit of Jewish origins, as a complete outsider, and has traversed that path. And now, although he modestly said he's still an ongoing process, I mean, Daniel has been running a Daf Yomi Shir for, I think you're in your third cycle now, Daniel?
Third cycle.
Yeah, most remarkable. I mean, it's something which is an inspiration. I also want to say, Daniel also mentioned that you know, his children have grown up in this world. Ruthie and I had the privilege of going to a bar mitzvah and another bar mitzvah and a bat mitzvah as well. We met the children, we heard the bar mitzvah speeches, even the bat mitzvah speech, with such chen, with such insight, with such candor, with such wit as well, and such a, to me, an inspiring illustration of the success of Daniel and Rachel Angela, their journey into the Orthodox Jewish world. But to go back to the book, we can see, I can see, I'm sure we can all appreciate how Daniel has a perspective and an expertise in this area, which enables him to write a book, which has enabled him to write a book, which could be of great benefit to a lot of people in the world. The difficulty is bringing it to their attention, because those people, in many cases, are not part of the kind of circuit within the
They're not in
Golders
this
group.
room.
They're not in this room yet, to a great extent. But there are many people, whether those who have an interest in becoming Jewish, or those who are Jewish but are living their lives on the periphery and the outskirts, those who have an attraction or a curiosity, or in some cases there may be other factors that are propelling them to knock on the door of the Orthodox Jewish world, and when somebody opens it, hey, where am I? What have I done? What do I do next? And this book, I think, is a wonderful resource for anyone in that kind of circumstance.
I think today, I mean, there are a lot of people who are interested in spirituality, obviously, and spiritual ideas, and there are a lot of great, and they obviously go first to the intellectual side of things, to reading books about mystical realities, and they get inspired by those books, and they get probably revelations about what a spiritual reality and the life within that spiritual reality might be like. But that is then in contradiction, or in with their current lifestyles, and obviously then something has to be done, and that something is where usually the stumbling blocks are, because intellectually they think it's great and they've been inspired, but then, well, what you do. And I think those who then decide, of the courage in a way, and the willpower to take things further in terms of their putting into practice of the principles they've read about, that's when the problems start. And I think that is where also the kiruv places, the places you go to they do a lot of social work. They do a lot of bringing people together. They have lunches, they have dinners, they have chats and other classes, but that still kind of doesn't actually put them on the day-to-day practical life of a observant person. And I think this is what a little bit where the missing link this book might sort of just help those at that stage. So I'll just sort of present a little bit the book now, because it's it'll make things clear. I think the most important thing about the book is that it's bright yellow. If you go to a bookshop, and especially Jewish bookshops, they're not usually bright yellow. There's brown and there's black, and a little bit of blue or something. But so this will already stick out in the bookshop, on the bookshelf, and that was the most important thing. And the title was hard also to find, because you had to make sure it was immediately going to attract the attention of the people who are in need of the content. So it had to be clear that it's a very practical guidebook, and not just another book about ideas. And so there's as I said, it starts with the order in which things might happen when you are starting to interact. So the first thing is about just when you meet somebody, what do you do? And if it's somebody from the opposite gender, that's where the problems start. And so this is the first, in a way, thing is don't shake hands with people of the opposite gender. And okay, that's those things, and also how to dress, how to turn up at an event, and then being invited for Shabbos, and that goes through all the order in which the meal happens, the order in which what you're expected to do, what you're expected not to do. There's also basics, blessings that are at the end, which are translated and transliterated, so it's easy to sort of learn the basic blessings. But the other thing I wanted to do with the book is that for every chapter, even though it's very practical, it's about practical issues, I did want to give a little insight for each topic that would hint at the deeper meaning of what the actions are, because I think this is another thing where people don't put the two together. I mean, they say, well, you have to wash your hands like this, you have to, you put this on, and you do have to wash it. But why? you know, and then you have to go and look for a book about, you know, which is this thick, and you look up, you know, and you find then what it means and why. So I think it was important to follow the actions with a short thing saying, well, this is why you're doing it, and this is what it means, and okay, then you can elaborate.
Can I read a short excerpt, Daniel? I mean, just open a friend, and perhaps you have just an example.
Okay, well, I mean, for the Sabbath, for instance, you know, and so these come in forms of little rabbi figures here, saying the rabbi explains, and so that's the sort of more, you know, sort of rabbinical explanation of things. But yeah, I mean, these paragraphs and these passages, I was mainly inspired by Rabbi Tatz's writings and, you know, getting a lot of ideas from all kinds of books. But I mean, there's a lot of him, let's say, in this, even though I wrote them, but it's based a lot on the ideas where you connect actions to deeper spiritual and sometimes mystical meanings, and that I think is necessary today, because people are not content with just saying, well, I have to do this and I have to do that now, and you know, I have to wear a kippah, I have to, but they immediately ask, well, why? You know, what is the reason? And there needs to be a simple, condensed little reason for everything we do, and I think often, you know, that can be of use to everyone. But, so, well, I mean, for instance, the Sabbath. Sabbath is probably the most well-known feature of Jewish life. It is the cornerstone of which everything else is built. It is also a very complex and intricate set of laws that can take a lifetime to master. Contrary to popular belief, Sabbath is not about resting. You're not supposed to sleep all day. It is a day of refraining from certain specific creative acts, anything that changes the status quo of the world in a particular way. Switching on a light creates a flow of an electrical current and is therefore forbidden. Cooking changes the state of the food ingredients, and so on. A person is meant to stop changing new things and enjoy fully the world as it is. God stopped creating the world on the seventh day, not because he was tired, but because any kind of work is a journey, and therefore it must have a destination, an end point. The Sabbath is the end point of the week, the destination. On a higher level, Sabbath is a taste of the world to come, the Messianic era, when everything will be the way it was meant to be. It makes the ideal of God's creation real for one day a week, and gives us an opportunity to be in harmony with the world without any interference on our part. Sabbath brings down a slice of holiness into the timeline of the physical world. So that's just a little, you know, thing about the Sabbath. So every little action in the synagogue. So then we go into the synagogue and what to do, and there are illustrations also of what is a talis, what are tefillin, and what is a Torah reading, what is a Torah scroll, and how it's read. And then we go into the Jewish year. So the Jewish year is basically all the holidays and festival basics. So it starts with Rosh Hashanah. So one page per festival, Sukkot, and explaining first of all what the festival is about. What is the main feature of the festival? So, you know, Hanukkah, it's the menorah, and then a food element of what, because obviously every festival is defined by its food in Jewish life, and so those three elements: what it's about, what's the main feature, and what the food, or you know, non-food in case of Yom Kippur, is that gives a short overview of everything. And then we go through the life, everyday life basics, which is basically from birth to death. So birth, circumcision, etc. Then youth, bar mitzvah, bas mitzvah, education, how you know, orthodox children are educated, and what happens after, yeshivas, and marriage, how dating works, you know, matchmakers, shadanim, and the wedding itself, how the wedding takes place. But it's all just one page each, so it's obviously not in depth. Family purity ideas, which obviously are very, you know, hard to understand for secular people. Having children, divorce, death, funeral, mourning period. So that's about a little sort of insight also about how the concentric circles of the mourning period start with the Shiva, then the Shloshim, and then the year, and then we get to the Jewish calendar, so the months, name of months. And here is a little bit about the sort of dress code, which is obviously completely, I think, alien to people from the outside world. They see all these different Jews, they have no idea why some are wearing fur hats, some are wearing white socks, some are wearing, look normal, and so here I wanted to just give a real breakdown, very sort of superficial and sort of broad lines, a breakdown of who is who. Modern Orthodox, Haredi, Baal Teshuvas, furry hat, Borsalinos, and again a little bit more about hair coverings, because hair is an issue in Jewish life, whether it's for men or for women. There's a lot of things about hair, so there's a whole chapter called "What's with the hair?" And then basic things: what is forbidden on Shabbos? Cooking, switching on lights, carrying, just giving basic things. What is kosher food? The basics again of kosher observance. Charity, tzedakah. Why do Jews? What is the concept of charity in Jewish life? And then I think this has probably been the hardest to do, but probably also quite useful, is what is the Torah? I often get asked by people, friends, and they say, well, what exactly is the Torah? Is it the Old Testament? Is it, So here I try to break down the written Torah, the oral Torah, and also the Talmud. People say, well, what is the Talmud? You get all these books, and so there's a page of the Talmud which is broken down into what is what, the Mishnah, the Gemara, the commentaries, and that explains a little bit what is what. And then we come to the main blessings, how to wash your hands before eating bread, and okay, all the different blessings. And at the end we have the basic prayers for the services. So morning service, Shachris, afternoon and evening. And obviously I don't put the prayers in here, but I always refer back to the Art Scroll Siddur for, prayer book, for those who want to, obviously if they want to carry on, study this, they will need to buy a prayer book and find those particular prayers in the book. And finally, glossary, because all these Hebrew words, nobody has a clue what they mean. So, starting from A to Z, we get all the main words that recur and meaning of those main words. So a sort of general glossary at the end. So that's, in a way, in a nutshell, what the book is about. But I just wanted to say that who is this book for? It is obviously for
rabbis.
Sorry? Rabbis, yes, that's right. Learn how to do your job. No, it's from people coming from the outside, but interestingly, I've also had interest from non-Jewish people who have no intention of converting, but who are interested because, we talk about, Christianity is very good at explaining what they're all about because they're trying to get more people to subscribe, but Judaism isn't, and Jewish people are very sort of closed about, what Judaism is actually about. And I think so for non-Jews, this, I've had questions and they found this actually quite useful in terms of giving them an idea of what is involved and what the ideas are and what the practicalities are. And it also helps them when they're interacting with us to know what to do and what not to do. And okay, I'm not saying that I'm trying to explain things to the non-Jewish world and secular world, but it does have a purpose that goes beyond just the Jew who wants to know more or person converting. It's also, I think, of interest to secular people who have an interest in spiritualities and who maybe know more about Buddhism, know something about, Islam or whatever, but about Judaism they know nothing, because there's nothing actually simple and clear enough to give them a quick idea about it without. Anyway, so that's
Thank you, Daniel. I'd like to have some books available, of course, but if anyone has any particular questions that you'd like to put to us now, you can. I'm sure there'll be time afterwards if you want to ask Daniel something privately. I'm sure that will be possible as well. But if any questions, we'd love to hear any.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Ruthie, yes.
I'm ready to sign up. I'm just wondering, you mentioned that Judaism doesn't believe in proselytizing.
Doesn't it?
Doesn't believe in proselytizing.
Right.
You mentioned that.
Right. Yeah, well, it's not as active as other religions that are trying to bring new people in.
It's not, we don't outwardly proselytize.
No, we don't. But we therefore, there's a bit of a wall therefore around Judaism in terms of information.
And also that a person can be righteous without being Jewish.
And also there's a lot of wrong and bad information out there,
Yes,
in terms of people look it up on the internet, and okay, you're going to start seeing all kinds of things that probably are okay in certain circles, but are not really relevant to an orthodox Jewish life. So there's a lot of misleading information probably. So from a purely insider's point of view, how do you then put across the basics to the outside without wanting necessarily to convince them to convert or to join the club?
Yeah.
Daniel, when you first heard that you were Jewish or found out,
Yeah.
what first went through your head? Did you know any Jewish people? Have you got any ideas or conceived?
I thought it was. Well, I don't know. I thought. I can't remember really much what I thought, but it wasn't anything dramatic. I mean, it wasn't like because it didn't mean anything, and since it was just a sort of kind of. But I do remember thinking that it kind of made sense in the family history, because I was, you said, well, why did my parents have to run away from their countries, during the war? Why did they, have such problems getting away? And so, it probably wasn't our fault or my fault to never actually question it, because if I had probably thought about it a bit deeper, I probably would have, put the two together. But it never occurred to say, well, it was just the war, so people ran away because they were, they didn't like the Nazis. Probably there were other,
You knew about the Nazis and Jewish people.
Yeah. Of course, and and my parents were always talking. It was all part of the conversation. I know the stories of my father's, but there was never a connection made with us being Jewish. And so then when that came along, it kind of said, well, that makes sense, and it kind of figures now why all these things happen. And also, it, as I said, because of my musical sort of career and work, I related it to composers, Jewish composers who were doing things that I liked, and I kind of felt, well, maybe rightly or wrongly, or maybe it was just sort of wishful thinking, that there was a kind of an affinity between what I was doing and what these other people were doing, and sort of thought, well, there's a kind of Jewish flavor in the art world that it comes across through these artists, but maybe that was just, imaginary.
At that time, when you first learned that you were Jewish, had you previously met any Orthodox Jewish people that you can recall?
No, as I
So
said,
probably the Jewish people that you knew or met or heard of were mostly secular.
Yeah, I had no idea, and obviously, as a secular person living in a secular world, secular Christian world, because the world is mainly, Western world is mainly Christian, you know, you get exposed to the basic low-level anti-Semitic kind of remarks, you know, and it's part of everyday life. So, you know, when people said, well, you know, you're acting Jewish means that you're stingy, you know, or whatever. I mean, you know, it came all those remarks,
Associations,
you know,
yeah.
association, which, you know, I mean, I had no really. I didn't go further in that. I didn't really mean it, but it was just like a joking kind of thing. Like you say, Scottish is like this, or you know, Irish is like this. And the Jews were, you know, treated as just another kind of ethnic reality, but superficially.
As you began to expose yourself to Judaism, was there any parts that resonated with you and said, I feel at home in this, or was it all?
I don't say I felt at home, but it just made sense intellectually. You know, you sort of question things, especially when it comes to religions and spiritual things. You know, if you're a kind of down-to-earth person, which I consider myself to be, you know, you just sort of say, well, you know, that doesn't really make sense, or, you know, this is just, you know, mumbo-jumbo or things. So I couldn't say that about what I was learning in the, you know, from the Jewish side of things, and everything was intellectually challenging, and therefore piqued your curiosity even more, and wanted to, you know, say, well, if that's the thing, then how, you know. So then the next class comes along, and then it sort of deals with a whole different area, but it all made sense, and so, you know, you sort of start thinking, well, I can't argue with that, you know. And so then you start thinking, well, if I think it's real and it's true, then, you know, what am I going to do about it, you know? But there wasn't a real thing that I felt, oh, I feel so Jewish, you know, that didn't happen. Probably still doesn't. You know, because I don't. I mean, I don't feel Jewish in terms of culturally, you know, that's not the case. But the spirituality is something that you build inside you, and you sort of acknowledge first, I think, intellectually with your mind that is the truth. I mean, you know, we are talking about truth and not truth. You know, it can't be both ways. You know, either there is a God or there is no God. It can't be that for some people there is, and some people, you know, there is a logic, and I think it's the logic which first struck me. It's the logic. It's the pure logic, and you say this and this and this. If you think this, then this has to happen. If you think that, you know, so it's a purely logical process of, you know, getting things into place in your mind. You know, other people obviously perceive things more and more intuitively, more and more, let's say, on an emotional level, but I didn't. For me, it was a purely, let's say, logical process of adding things together.
Daniel, what role did music have in your embracing of a more orthodox? What role did music have?
Well, it was, you know, it depended on what I was doing at the time in terms of what jobs were coming along. But as I say, it was more a sort of an acknowledging and trying to find connecting affinities with Jewish composers and Jewish artists, and seeing, well, am I somehow, do I have anything that kind of is in tune with those people? But did it change my music? Not necessarily.
Well, the reason I ask is because I recently read your memoir.
That's a whole other book.
Yeah, but in your memoir, you very much kind of not simplistically equate music with spirituality,
Yeah.
but the challenge of music was to achieve a kind of a higher spirituality in your memoir. So it just sort of begs the question, was there a pathway to Jewish spirituality through music?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I mean, I think, as I said before, you know, becoming religious, music was my religion, and music was my spiritual path. So I used music as a conduit to express whatever spiritual being I might, have inside me or be. So it was. That's why I say I wasn't necessarily looking for a religion. I was content with what I had found in music, and that was in a way enough for me at the time. So what it probably did do is put music into perspective. So before, music was everything, and suddenly, slowly, music became just an element of a wider, larger spiritual existence and life. So it was. I can't say now that, I think music is everything. It's not. It's a manifestation of amongst so many others, manifestations of a spiritual reality which is linked to God. But it's my vocabulary, and so I'm using that particular manifestation to explore my spirituality through music. But before, it was only that. So it kind of widened the horizon in a way.
I think I've got a question for the rabbi. I mean,
If I can't answer it, I'll get Daniel to answer it.
Get your money's worth.
is it by doctrine that Judaism is not evangelical? And also, I grew up in a kind of non-observant Jewish.
By the way, David is a very highly regarded and talented filmmaker who has got many credits to his name. But
but I do remember. I grew up in New York City. I do remember there were mitzvah vans that would be out there, and they would try to suss you out. Is this some wayward Jewish kid that they could bring back into the fold?
They put the tefillin on.
And I remember.
David didn't get close enough to that.
Then there was the other van, which was the Jews for Jesus, and they used to stake out similar kind of events.
They were fighting it out.
But so is it by doctrine that and were those Orthodox Jews which were the Satmar or whoever they were they in violation of some doctrines and be out there trying to hook in an unobservant Jew?
So the answer is as follows. Insofar as Jewish people, there is a very well-established sort of aspiration, even imperative, to do what one can to inspire or to encourage Jewish people to lead more authentically Jewish lives. And in a world in which we live today, a Jewish world in which most Jews are quite distant from Jewish practice and Jewish observance and Jewish doctrine and Jewish conviction, so there's a wide canvas on which to endeavor to bring Jews closer. So I don't personally endorse the Chabad evangelical approach, but that's partly because of my style and partly for other reasons. But the underlying principle, is it sort of praiseworthy? Is it generally recognized as a worthwhile or legitimate endeavor? Yes, it is. But as I said, there are different ways perhaps to go about it. Not everyone has the temperament or the personality to undertake that kind of work. Insofar as evangelism towards the unchurched, towards the rest of mankind, which of course Daniel alluded to the fact that Christianity by and large is a proselytizing faith. Islam is as well. I don't know about Buddhism or other religions, but certainly those two so-called daughter religions of Judaism have always pursued an agenda of spreading the word and persuading others or forcing others to sign up to their religion. But Judaism has by and large not gone down that path. There is a bit of a dispute among historians as to whether that is by preference or by necessity. Because until modern times, if Jews were seen to be proselytizing the people around them, it would be catastrophic. I mean, there are many places where for a Christian to become a Jew was punishable by death. Here in England as well, that was the case for a long time, and therefore it was a great rarity. There was a famous case of Robert of Reading in 1222, who moved to Oxford to study theology, and he converted to Judaism, and he was burned at the stake as a result. So it was very, I'm sorry if I'm drifting into irrelevance.
No, not at all.
So therefore, for a long time, Judaism has not been a proselytizing faith. It could be that in earlier stages, there may have been more of an impulse to, bring people close to the Word of God. Now, insofar as Judaism today, where we're free to not just practice our religion, but to proselytize others if we choose to do so, Judaism, for the orthodox Judaism, for the most part, retains that reticence, that reluctance to try to, interest others or persuade others to become Jewish and to, endorse, the God of Israel. When I grew up, you grew up in New York. I grew up in Lafayette, Indiana, which is the Bible Belt, and I remember in I think it was 1972 or 74, they had the evangelical Christians had a, they called it Key 72 or something like that, a national campaign to convert people, especially Jews. And I don't know if you remember, they had billboards. I found it. It's I found Jesus, and then we used to say, we never lost it, and that sort of thing. So we were trying to push back against that, the Christian proselytizing, but we didn't repay in kind and say, we're going to bring in all of these Christians and all the Protestants and all the, Catholics in Lafayette, Indiana, get them into shul on a Shabbos morning and give them a drasha. That's not our style. I probably answered a lot more than you wanted to hear, but I think we should bring to a close. Okay, when the reader will get the last question, and then we'll have a chance for those who would like. The books cost only £12, and we've got a number of them here.
You can pay more, and the proceeds go to Kesher.
Is it also available on Amazon? Or
Well, it's available on Amazon.com at the moment, not .co.uk for unknown reasons.
That's
but
America, right?
America, yeah. They're available at Jewish bookshops here,
Yeah.
or if all else fails, then contact me.
Yeah, you read it.
This question was really following on from David's question, which was, have you since found that you found your additional spirituality through connections with Jewish music? I mean, I don't mean pop music. I mean, whether it's Zmirot or through that. And then, conversely, has that then influenced your own creative music? Has there been a kind of additional blossoming through?
Okay, short answer, no. I am at pains at trying to enjoy Jewish music, especially at weddings and other celebrations.
I meant like literary.
I know, yeah. I mean, there's a mirror. I don't always find my emotional sort of connection there. It's probably because a lot of Jewish, music which we find is a lot of the songs come from sort of Middle Europe, Polish folk music and things. I mean, there's a whole sort of range of things, but I think if anything, Sephardi music is much more down my,
Splitting your Sephardi in your reading.
Are you tempted to write us perhaps new Jewish music? This could be the next edition.
Well, I don't have
Did you do something about the shofar?
ambitions, but Sephardi music, because it comes from Spain and is more influenced by North African influences, Middle Eastern, I find that much more interesting and much more, purely from a musical point of view. The Ashkenazi sort of things for me are just not my cup of tea. But writing things. Okay, I wrote a tune for Eshes Chayil for my wife, and that's what we sing on Shabbos evening. That's
Is it available on Spotify?
No, it's only available in our home if you can.
The smuggle in a tape recorder or something like that.
So that was my
Or
only.
if we invite you, will you sing it?
Sorry?
If we invite you, we'll sing it.
I don't impose, but that's.
Every letter of the Aleph base is supposed to be a different musical.
Yeah, and there's a cantillation in laning in the reading of the Torah, you know, and all that is very interesting. It's just that it's, and you know, it's always interesting to try and work out historically in the temple what were the Levim singing, you know, what kind of music were they doing, playing that, or we know the instruments, but we don't know obviously what kind of music they were playing, and so that's intriguing, and you know, one could kind of maybe you know, try and guess what kind of music was being played or not. It's very hard to know. And you know, King David obviously was a musician, and he was playing, and you know, what was he playing? You know, it's that would be an interesting thing to find out, but I don't think we can, because there was no notation system, and so it was all just by orally transmitted tunes, and probably some of the tunes we sing today are still coming down from
There is
that
a
time. There's
legend that there's
some
some
of them
which are rooted in
yeah, but not always probably the way we sing it. And you know,
I always
yeah.
understood that each letter of alphabet was a musical half note or quarter note or whatever, and the words of the songs, you take those notes, that will be the music.
Okay. I'm sure some scholars have done research into that, but you know, I'm more sort of intuitive about what I do, and so it's not, you know, it's probably a PhD job.
Okay, maybe in another lifetime. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Daniel.
Wasting so much
Thank
of
you
your time.
for a captivating presentation, and
Thank you again to Rabbi Simon, to Ruthie for hosting it,
it,
and the you know, the journey goes on.
thank you. Well, how do I connect? Kesher means connect, and so it's, as Daniel said, it's wonderful for us to be able to host this evening, and especially casting our shared memories back 20 years ago and more when we first met, and I do remember that first conversation, by the way. Yeah. And so here we are today, you know, with much to celebrate in the intervening 20 plus years. So
And
thank
if
you.
you don't personally need the book, but please spread the word, so you
Yeah.
might know somebody who's
Everyone should have the
You
book.
can always buy it for a friend or buy it on speculation. You never know who may come
the
your
first
way.
edition. It's the first edition. Yeah.